Thank you for just being a part of this program designed to spread the ministry of reaching and outreach for disabilities. So I just want to welcome each and every person to this program. I just want you to share if you're seeing it on your profile, if you're seeing it on your platform, to share this right now. We want everyone to be aware, we want everyone to be a part of this. So I'm just going on my platform as well to ensure that each person is able to see and to join. So thank you once more. I'm just kind of doing a few things with this, but we are live and direct with the Disabilities Ministries. And I'm just so excited to have this program. This is our second interview for this period. In starting off with the Disabilities Ministries, I'm Sean Brooks. I'm the uh, Disabilities Coordinator for Georgia Cumberland Conference. And we had a great time in our last interview, and we want to go forward now with our second interview. And I'm going to share a little bit about the person that we'll be talking to today. And as this is shared on the platforms, feel free to share your comments, feel free to share your questions, and we'll try and get to them. But today we're going to be speaking with Louise Herbert. And Louise is probably a powerful advocate for disabilities, as you'll find out. She has an extensive career blazing the trail for persons with disabilities. She has led senior projects on this aspect. She has done rallies, fundraisers, marches, workshops in the business community, and even for the government, as to say where she's been working primarily, which is Antigua and Barbuda. She has held positions on the executive committee as treasurer, secretary, and nominee for vice president. She has facilitated several workshops for youth with disabilities in various areas of leadership and works closely with the Peace Corps to institute a youth organization for youth with disabilities. Louise has several highlights of her career with the disabled community, of which she is extremely proud. She received the National Youth Award and a Woman of Influence Award in 2007, and she represented Antigua and Barbuda in Grenada to the United Nations Human Rights Universal Periodical Review for the Commonwealth countries of the Caribbean. In 2012, she was a government-appointed Disability Task Force Committee member until she migrated to the United States in 2013. Luis has facilitated workshops in Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, and Grenada. And due to her strong faith, determination, focus, and vision, she's blazing the path to make the platform for equal rights for the physically challenged in the Caribbean a major human rights issue. Currently, she began working with the Organization for Persons with Disabilities in Antigua and Barbuda in several capacities, one specifically as consultant and the other as a trainer. And she began in December of 2018 and 2019 for the annual I Am Able conference held at Royalton Resort and Spa in 2022. And that was for the first ever Fifth Congress of the Americas, CBR, CBID, Caribbean, all hosted by the government of Antigua and Barbuda and the Commonwealth. And out of that Congress, they're able to have a collaboration for persons with disabilities to host an awards and gala to recognize the impact of persons with disabilities across the region. Educationally, she holds two business degrees and is currently pursuing her MBA with emphasis in human resource. She's also an author, speaker, writer, professional consultant with experience in social media, and a strong advocate for persons with disabilities. She recently returned from Antigua and Barbuda, where she was the lead consultant on a capacity building program for persons with disabilities. Uh, she she, along with two other facilitators from the local government, trained and empowered the disability community on the importance of education, awareness, and advocacy. And she's also writing a book entitled Through the Eyes of the challenge. And we hope to see that book in short order. So we we
Yes.
want to see that happen. I just want to welcome to this platform Louise. Louise, we connected a little bit, probably the latter part of last year.
Mhm.
She's a member of Fayette Church, and she is, as can be seen in that bio, a strong advocate in the disability community. And so, again, just want to say welcome. Thank you for being a part
Yes.
of this.
Yes. Thank you, Pastor Burks. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that was a almost a 2.5 minute introduction. I didn't realize it was that long.
That's all right.
Oh
Well,
wow.
it
Yeah.
probably just paints a small picture, a window of
Yes.
the many things that you have done, and you're trying to put all these things in just a small amount. But we're grateful for what you have done and and are continue to do in the
Mhm.
community, and just see that you have this extensive career blazing the trail for persons with disabilities. And I want to know what makes you so passionate about this ministry.
Um, well, this passion came about while I was living in Antigua. Um, I spent 15 years there, and within that 15 years, I became connected to a very stronger, a very strong advocate, even stronger than I am. His name is Mr. Bernard Warner, and he introduced me to the disability movement. And being that I was born with a physical challenge, well, that should have ended up being a disability, where you can see it physically. Um, that too was also uh, another passion part because I lived it. I was living the experience, and despite the fact that mine may not have been as obvious as Mr. Warner's, because he's I think, a right amputee, um, the biases still existed, and so I wanted to be on board with getting away from and empowering and making it known that these stigmas are not okay because persons with disabilities, whether you can see it or not, are humans too, and they're God's children, and He doesn't make any mistakes. And so when I started with him, I just started literally from the grassroots in the Caribbean.
Mhm. And so you said that you were touched with the disability, and you now are able to empathize with what
Mhm.
many probably are experiencing. Can you elaborate more and to say what were some of the things that you experienced
Okay,
with, yeah.
no problem. Well, I was born with what is referred to as clubbed feet. Some people have it with just one foot. I had it with both. My left foot was worse than the right. And what that is, it's a bone structural issue. So from my ankle, my the soles of my feet were turned inwards facing each other, right? So at the time, with the resources that Antigua and Barbuda had, the doctors would told my mother that, okay, we have to have surgery on her foot. um, but that wasn't necessary. All I needed was a brace. She
Mm,
found that out. She tried to get the brace, tried to get the doctor to give her permission to take me to, I think it was Jamaica, either Jamaica or Barbados, so that I could get the brace because I was a baby. I was literally a baby, still up in hand,
mm,
baby. I wasn't even walking yet. And he didn't want to give her permission. As a matter of fact, she had one doctor that wanted to adopt me from her, and she was like, no, if I have to drink water and suck salt, I'm keeping my daughter.
mercy.
And she had a lot of grief because, after the surgery, what they did was they broke my bones, as tender as they were and as little as I was, and they wrapped my foot completely in the cast. So
Mhm,
my toes ended up being what is referred to as, for lack of a better word, deformed. We don't really like to use that word.
mhm,
They were somewhat disfigured, and they've been permanently disfigured because of that. And so my left leg now, because the cast was on so tight as well, the muscular circulation that forms the calf on my left foot, kind of was damaged. I have instep damage on my left foot. So I don't have a lot of range of motion in either of my ankles. Not that I don't have any, I just don't have enough. And so when I was living in Antigua growing up, 5, 6 years old, 2, 3 years old, I didn't remember much about those years, but I didn't know there was anything wrong with me. My mother had to eventually run, literally run, and leave her stepmother, my grandmother, because she was very abusive to her. And she had a lot of life crisis that she had to leave. My mother became an Adventist before she migrated.
Mm.
And so when she left, running away from my grandmother, she left me with a church sister that helped her become an Adventist. When I came here to America, she was in New York, so I stayed in New York. I went to school in New York. Horrible experience. Then is when I knew something was wrong with me.
Mm.
They teased me, they provoked me, they made
Mm.
fun of me, they bullied me endlessly. I wore shoes that had holes in it. I didn't have a school bag. I literally was a target. I had a natural hair. Then on top of that, my complexion was very, very brown because I had just left Antigua and I had an accent. They made fun of my accent. There were so many instances where, I could have been harmed. They didn't want to hold my hand because back then AIDS was a thing. And so they thought somehow I might have my mother had it and I came out deformed like that because of AIDS. So when we had a school dance and there was a thing called a line dancing and you did the do-si-do down the middle
Mhm.
and you had to hold each other's hand. Nobody wanted to hold my hand. The guy that I was supposed to be doing the do-si-do with didn't want to hold my hand.
Wow.
There were so many horrible instances like that. Then one day my mom said to me, I told her, look, if you can't take me out of this, because it was a government school, if you can't take me out of this government school, then send me back home to Antigua. I was so like done with these children. They were horrible. And she took me out of that school and sent me to an Adventist school, an Adventist primary school. Now, they weren't any different. I'm going to just call a thing a thing. They weren't any different, but they were way more diplomatic about it.
Okay.
So they would ostracize me in terms of the friendship and being my friend and being in close proximity to me and having a friendship and cultivating that connection. But when it came to teasing and provocation and those kinds of things, no, they didn't do that. But nobody wanted to be my friend.
Mm.
And I noticed that in our circles. I'm gonna just say that because when I left Trinidad and went back to Antigua, and I was living in Antigua, and I moved home to Antigua for the first time, nobody wanted to be my friend. I didn't know that this was the problem and this was the case until years later. I'll tell you, years later, almost 8 years later, my friend, who's still my friend up to today, she said to me, a lot of people told me, Louise, why you're her friend? You don't see how she look, you don't see how she walk. And
Mhm.
I'm like, really? She said, yeah. There were a lot of people that decided they didn't want to be your friend because of how you walked. I said, wow.
So
So
simply because of how
yeah,
you walked. Wow.
just because of how I walk. Oh, I could tell you some more stories about that too.
so, so so you probably then share then, I guess we're hinting at is that for disabilities, there are sometimes aspects of bullying that will come around, aspects of
Yes,
teasing. And
yes.
and for you, how do you deal with that? Because this is something that many individuals with disabilities experience. How did you deal
Mhm.
with that?
Um, First, I will say that I had support from home and the church. There were a lot of people who rallied around me, and that's very important. If there's a person listening to the replay or is listening to it live right now, having that support from family and friends who really see you as a person and not as some stigmatic disability, that's important.
Hmm.
Um, I got into a lot of creative skills, art. I learned to draw. That was
Okay.
one of my channels. And writing. That's how writing is a thing for me now. I started writing when I was about 9 years old, 10. I started back then they called it a diary. And I used to do a lot of that, but I wasn't doing it as much. Then I got into singing. Yeah. So singing was another way that I channeled all this vexation and all this anger And I sang on every choir in every group in all areas of my life: school, church, Pathfinders.
Awesome.
That's another area too. Pathfinders. Pathfinders was a very intricate part of my upbringing. Um, and as a youth, I did a lot of partying. Growing up in New York, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I'm not gonna pretend like I was always squeaky clean. I grew up in New York, and house parties was a thing back then in the 80s and the 90s, coming into the 2000s. I did a lot of house partying. And granted, I never did drugs, never did anything illicit, never did any of that, you know, that extra things that other young people do, because I had other things to put my energy in. And I had vowed at the time that despite what I was feeling and how much my esteem was kind of broken but still thriving, I was not going to have children out of wedlock,
Mhm.
nor was I going to have a baby daddy,
Okay.
nor was I going to contract any kind of sexually transmitted diseases or
Mercy.
anything like that. So, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm still childless and husbandless at 46, but it's okay. I am quite okay.
Awesome.
So those are the areas that I ventured into. I do
Mhm.
want to share this though.
Yeah.
Um, the lifestyle that I chose to live, a lot of men looked at it as though it was a problem. They thought that something was wrong with me. And I told them, no, nothing is wrong with me. And another thing that I experienced is a lot of men saying to me, even Adventist Christian men who liked me. Now, mind you, I didn't have options. Let me say that too. I had
Mhm.
options. But one of them in particular, he said to me, well, I mean, I like you and you're really nice and, you make a good wife. And I really appreciate who you are. He said, but it's your feet. I don't know if my child is going to come up with that. I said, come up with that? Excuse me?
Mm.
That? And I explained it to him. I said, it's not the same way I explained it just now, where it was surgery and it was the botch surgery that has it looking like this. It's not hereditary. He refused to hear me. And so he went someplace else and had another child, and she's 12. If he and I had gotten together, she would have been 13.
Mm.
I'm like, I saw him on my last trip. This is that last trip that you mentioned that I went on in last month. Yeah,
Mhm.
he came by to visit. And he was like, "Oh, Louise, it's good to see you." I'm like, I'm sure it is.
So, and I've heard individuals say, because of a disability, they were counseled not to get married. Some potential suitors were scared away. So
Mhm.
you're actually sharing something that may be very real for several
Yes.
individuals. And I just want to say thank you for being so real about it.
Uh-huh.
I also noticed that you have participated in many programs as an advocate.
Uh-huh.
And what are some of the high points, or some of the programs that you have participated in that you want to elaborate on right now?
Okay. Well, that's let's see. When I went home, I started out in the Association for Persons with Disabilities. And so Bernard, being the president, um, asked me to get trained by the United Nations. And they had a UN Women, and they trained women on youth in crisis.
Okay.
So that was one of the first things that I did. And then after that, that's how I got into the training of young people with disabilities. Now, in addition to that training, I had a youth leadership training that was done by our conference, the North Caribbean Conference of Seventh Adventists. And so they train us in
Mhm.
youth leadership. And because it was in all areas, Pathfinders, Eager Beavers, Adventurers, Pathfinders, Master Guide, AY. So this also tied into my ability to be able to minister to youth as well. And so I could minister to both our youth and the youth outside of the church. Then there was the women's ministry. Now, women's, that's Mr. Brooks, women's ministry helped me a lot. Women's ministries in Antigua helped me so much in my
Wow. Mm.
Ooh, let me tell you. Ooh, yes. Women's ministries. They did a training. They did a training for women who wanted to train other women. So I had the women's training, the youth leadership training, plus the UN women's training for youth in crisis. So all of that was just like a catapult into the most obvious direction: youth with disabilities, women and girls with disabilities, and just people, men, women with persons with disabilities. And so that's how I was able to get chosen to go to Grenada for the UN periodical review. That's how he asked me now to be a consultant with the organization, because he refuses to take on anyone that's not a person with a disability.
Mhm.
And I agree with that. As advocates, we advocate for people to be included. It's not an exclusion, it's an inclusion. You'll be amazed how high the statistics are globally
Mhm.
of the issue with inclusion. It's a global crisis
Wow.
because a lot of people with disabilities, whether you can see it or not, face heavy stigma um, for not being employable or not deserving of an education, and even the relationship aspect of it is shunned, and like, why you want to do that? You're not somebody, you don't deserve love, you don't need love, you're a person with a disability, what are you going to be able to provide,
Mm.
really? So it's not the inclusion is very important. And then after that, once we realized that the United Nations had a convention on the rights of persons with disabilities, I then went into deeper details as to what that entails, what are the articles within the convention, and we were able to pull out pieces of it and speak publicly to it. So when we advocated, we spoke from the UN's perspective. Then when Antigua and Barbuda decided to sign on, I was supposed to go to the United Nations in New York to be there for when they signed it. I wasn't able to make it, but I felt proud knowing that I had a major part
Awesome.
in them
You
actually.
contributed.
Yes, significantly. Let me tell you, I mean, so much so that I had a minister of government call my phone. You understand? Government ministers don't intentionally call your phone unless they have something really important to say. But no, I was getting ratted at. Oh, how you gonna say that I wasn't there? Da, 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 da. He went on and on and on. He was mad. And he was mad because we went on the radio and we said that we're trying to get in touch with this man because he was under the ministry that was at the time responsible for disability.
Mm.
And so it was his duty to therefore be in the UN when the convention was signed. But unfortunately, nothing happened fast enough. So by the time the convention was to be signed, another minister had that portfolio. And we had by that time moved from the Ministry of Health into the Ministry of Social Transformation. And all of those pieces, moving from health, where they're just looking at it as a health issue and a health crisis, to it being a social issue, was
Mhm.
where we were going. Because if it's a social issue, then it's a broader perspective, you can do
Yeah.
more with it, the dynamics would be greater. But if it's just a health issue, then you're limited to just health. So that's why we advocated for it to be moved from that ministry to the next. That was another fight, and so those are all the things that I was able to get involved in. And we also had um we had connections and alliances with other government entities like Gender Affairs and the AIDS Secretariat. And we had an annual event called the International Day for Persons with Disabilities because it's recognized by the United Nations. And so we celebrated every single year a whole week of activities dedicated to people with disabilities.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Um, wow. You're doing so much and you're already making such a great impact with United Nations, with impact in the Caribbean. And you're here now in Georgia. You're in Georgia Cumberland Conference. You're at Fayette Church. And just want to know, you I think recently you were appointed as
Yes,
the what ministry?
the Possibility Ministries director
All
for
right.
Fayette Church.
So for
Yes.
those who are listening in, you may hear the term Possibilities Ministries, and you say, what is that? Um, that is a term used by the General Conference, and it will be in our church manual. So if you're a Seventh-day Adventist, it's going to be in our church manual in the updated version. North America Division uses Disabilities Ministries. I think for the aspect that disabilities can be generally understood and seen and recognized across
Mhm.
the board. So they're not at odds with each other,
Right.
but you may hear different terms. So disabilities, possibilities. And so presently, you are the Possibilities Ministries leader for FIT.
Mhm.
And how has that been for you? I know you just started, but how has that been? What
Yeah.
are the dreams that you have for that ministry in your local church?
Um, well, yes, I've just been appointed about last month officially. I do have some plans. I just made mention of it. That week of activities in December,
Mhm.
um, where I am planning to invite a couple of key speakers that I've had the personal pleasure of working with. Um, One is from Antigua, and he was the director of the Caribbean Council for the Blind, and he's now in the United Nations working for the blind. Also, Dexter Thomas, who was there last month.
Mhm.
Um, I plan to I want to liaise with them to be the keynote speakers, um, and I also am looking to do a non-traditional event. I love antique vehicles, so I'm planning to do an antique car show. I've already been able to reach out to a few people who I see own antique vehicles,
Mhm.
and the whole purpose of that is to raise funds for the Organization for Persons with Disabilities in Antigua. Um, it takes a lot to thrive and do well in the organization, and especially when you're a person with disabilities and you're an organization that is nonprofit and is considered an NGO, a non-governmental organization. They're currently working on something called the CBR, and you mentioned it in my bio. It's the um, community-based rehabilitation, and they're working on hydroponics and plant-based growth, where you're teaching persons with disabilities how to grow their own and eat
Mhm.
their own.
Wow.
So I'm also going to ask Bernard to make a presentation on that as a part of the whole week of activities. I'm also going to see if I can get on some of the radio stations to do this, like an interview, but speak specifically to that. Of course, I'm gonna have to ask you to come on over here, do something virtual if you can't come in
Anytime.
person. And
Anytime.
I'm looking to see if I could get the director for the ADA, the state ADA, to come and speak on the ADA. If she can't come, then she could send one of her representatives. And the director for Fulton County. Fulton County, the counties have their own ADA segments, but the state one is the one that trains and goes to the different state agencies, like all the different departments of the state and the counties and things like that. So as much as I can get to be there to support, it will be great, because I just believe in inclusion.
Beautiful.
Able-bodied people need persons with disabilities need able-bodied people, and you guys need us.
I'm,
So
I'm
that's what my
I'm
plan
listening
is.
to all that you're doing, and I'm like, wow, Pastor Christopher Harvey, you're you're good. So Pastor Harvey is a pastor for Fayette Church, a good friend of mine, and you can see, I'm sure he's listening. I will listen. And so for those who are close to Fayette Church, listen, you have a powerful advocate in
Yes.
Louise there. And that means, I'm sure, there are going to be several ministries geared towards those
Mhm.
with disabilities. So it does something because it allows for the community to know that there's a caring church family, a place of worship that will look out
Mhm.
for them. So I'm just grateful that you are there. So
Mhm.
May is also Mental Health Awareness Month. And,
Yes.
and and many individuals have been impacted by mental illness, and especially with the
Mhm.
COVID-19 pandemic. That did not
Mhm.
help. What needs have you seen in this area, and in what ways do you think the church can assist? So very quickly, if you want
Yeah.
to just share that.
Um, I've seen a lot of struggle in silence, suffer in silence type of experiences.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people who suffer in silence because they don't want to be a burden to anyone. A lot of people are prideful. They don't want to seek counseling, or there may be a situation where they feel embarrassed and they don't want to talk about it, or they don't want to say anything. It it could be grief as well. Lots of people lost loved ones during the
Mhm.
pandemic, and so you find that they would be completely just lost, and feel so troubled. I had a personal experience with that myself. So I think that if the church is aware of the need and they go out and seek information and get the surveys of who is in the community and who has these needs, because mental health doesn't only impact everybody, people, it impacts persons with disabilities too, even though they have caregivers, and if they can know what the need is and have the resource available, let them know, okay, well, we don't directly have a spot or a place in our congregation or in our church physical location, but we can give you a resource, or we can take you to this person, or we have these free resources, because a lot of times people don't have the income to pay for services. So there's a lot of free services that the state offers, the counties offer, the little communities and the cities offer, that we have to be aware of, so that we can use them and tap into those to help our people in our communities. Because listen, to be honest, a church must not move from a community and the community don't miss them.
That's true.
And in order for that to happen, you
I
have to
agree.
be involved.
I agree. And there's so many ways to be involved. And
Mhm.
when it comes to mental health, as you said, it can affect those with disabilities, those without. It matters not. And
Yep.
I believe that if you see yourself as non-disabled, just place temporary before that, because eventually,
Okay.
as long as you
Okay.
live, once you live in this world, you will
Yes.
get a disability. It's just inevitable.
Hmm.
But we do need communities whereby we
Yes.
can find acceptance, where we can
Mhm.
seek to be understood, and we can share. So yes, there are resources out there in the wider community that we can point to, and I hope that we can share that on our Facebook site. And I know
Mhm.
you're a powerful resource. We're tapping into you. Um,
Yes.
but also, I guess my prayer and hope is that each church can be a place where
Right.
individuals who may have a struggle can find a safe spot, a place
Yes.
where
Yes. A safe place. Yes.
members can
Very
speak with
important.
them, pray with them, encourage
Hmm.
them, and sometimes just listen. That's all
Yeah.
that's
Just listening.
required.
Yep.
Just listen to the story. And
Hmm.
I'm glad that you shared earlier in this story, just your struggles.
Hmm.
You shared it, and I'm sure that you said the women's ministries, the pathfinders helped you. So
Hmm.
there were key individuals as well as key structures in the church that
Yeah.
that helped you in your
Hmm.
journey. And
Indeed.
and so the church can be a place
Hmm.
of healing.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
I'm thinking that's what I'm gathering from that. It can
Yes.
be a place of healing.
Yes.
And so if
Absolutely.
you're listening to this, and you are interested in having a disabilities ministries coordinator, a possibilities ministries coordinator at your local church, feel free to get in touch with your
Hmm.
pastor. If you're in the Georgia Cumberland Conference, you can get in touch with myself or with Louise, because I asked Louise to kind of assist. She's a powerful
Yes.
resource. And so I wanted you to get a chance to get to know Louise even more. So she
Mhm.
is presently at Fayette. And Louise, I'm showing your email here.
Yes.
So they can always
Hmm.
contact you at lherbert76@gmail.com. And
Hmm.
so if they need a speaker, if they need you to come by, share a presentation, feel free.
I'll be more than glad to. More than glad to.
And
Yes.
thank you for being a person who can offer a safe space for
Mhm.
individuals as well. And thank you for being willing and open to share just your story. I know we just tapped into it just a
Mhm.
few minutes. There's so much more to say, but from the bottom
Yes.
of my heart, I'm deeply appreciative of you taking the time to share
Mhm.
with us. So just want to say thank you, everyone, and we can just probably close off with prayer.
Wait, before we
Um,
go,
Go ahead.
one more
Mhm.
thing before we go. For those of you who are listening, as I spoke just now about the event that we'll be planning for Fayette at the
Yeah.
end of the year, as many of you that can come along, this is an open invitation. December 3rd is International Day for Persons with Disabilities, and we'll be having what is referred to as a 25 days of activism that will start
Mm,
in November.
gotcha.
And it goes right down until the 3rd. And then on the 10th of December, which is International Human Rights Day, we host a workshop for um, for the human rights aspect of the advocacy. So this is just an open invitation that if you are interested in attending, because America does things very differently to other parts of the world, and there are a lot of things that we have here that other parts don't have. And so just to get the coming together of both sides to share and to be involved in what the needs are over there in the other parts of the world versus what the needs are up here, and the resources sharing and the information sharing, that's the whole purpose of bringing everyone together in this capacity. I plan early. I hate anything last minute. So if you are
Right.
interested or you know anyone, just get in touch with me and we can work together to make a difference.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Wow, I'm impressed. And I'm sure you've been impressed for those who are listening. Again, just want to say thank you, Louise. And just want to offer a quick word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this opportunity where we can discuss and talk about the needs in the Disabilities Ministries. Thank you for Louise. Thank you for her spirit of advocacy where she goes out, Lord, and she's seeking to make a difference. You have empowered her. You have given her wisdom and the understanding to know how to help, to know how to write laws, to know how to implement. And so, God, we pray that you'll continue to bless her ministry and even at our local church at Fayette, Lord, allow that church to reach hundreds, in fact, thousands, maybe even millions of individuals for the kingdom. And we just pray
Amen.
that those who are listening, if they feel bullied, if they feel somehow excluded from society, allow them to know that not only do you love them, but there are churches, there are individuals who also love them. And Lord, we pray that they can see that they are here for a reason, and you are going to use them in mighty ways, and you are using them. So, Lord, bless them. Bless us all, and keep us by your power and your grace. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
All right, God bless
Amen.
everyone. Thank you for just joining us today, and hope you have a great day. Take care.
All right then.